So you're here because you want to go deep.
Right.
Get past the surface level stuff and really understand something meaningful.
Yeah, cut through the noise.
Exactly. And today we're doing just that. We're diving into a spiritual practice, maybe one you haven't heard much about, but it's incredibly rich. It's called Vaishnava Sadhana.
And right at the heart of Vaishnava Sadhana is, well, it's love. It frames love as, the key thing, not just an emotion, but the actual way we connect to the divine, the real core of worship.
Right. And we're not just skimming the surface today. We're going right for what many consider the most intense, the most intimate part of this practice.
Yeah.
The Madhura Bhava.
Madhura Bhava. It translates to something like the sweet mood or conjugal mood.
Yeah, think of the absolute closest bond possible between the worshiper and, well, the object of worship. That's the kind of territory we're exploring.
And the Madhura Bhava, it's quite distinct because it involves the devotee relating to the divine almost like a mistress to her beloved.
Okay.
It's not about that distant reverence you might expect. It's about this intense closeness, total lack of barriers, really. Just this single-minded focus on the beloved.
And we have a really powerful example of this, don't we? Sri Ramakrishna. His experiences with Madhura Bhava were, well, pretty extraordinary. We'll definitely get into that.
Absolutely.
So our mission for this deep dive is pretty clear. Let's try to understand the main ideas behind Madhura Bhava and see how they played out in Sri Ramakrishna's life.
Sounds good. So maybe we should start with how devotion generally works in Vaishnavism. Our sources talk about it as like an ascending scale.
Okay, ascending how?
Well, you might start off just feeling, awe at God's power and majesty. But as you go deeper, that feeling can change. It becomes more personal, more intimate.
Right, so less about just acknowledging power and more about forming a real personal relationship.
Exactly. And as that relationship deepens, the sweetness of it, that connection itself, becomes the main thing, the most important part.
And Madhura Bhava is the peak of that.
That's how it's seen, yeah. This conjugal relationship, as it's described, it kind of dissolves all separation. All formality just drops away. The devotee's whole focus, their entire being, is just directed towards the beloved with this all-consuming passion.
Now, this isn't a new idea, is it?
Yeah.
I mean, Sri Chaitanya and his followers are really central here, our sources say.
Very central. And you can trace it back even further to the Puranas, especially the stories about Sri Krishna in Vrindavan.
Ah, the gopis, the milkmaids.
Yes, exactly. The gopis and their love for Krishna, that's really the classic example. Their devotion wasn't about getting something for themselves, not even their own happiness.
Really? What was it about then?
Purely about Krishna's happiness, bringing him joy. They completely surrendered everything, body, mind, soul, just to please him. It was, you could say, the ultimate selfless love.
Okay, but when you use language like mistress to her lover, or talk about this passionate gopi devotion, it can sound, well, very human. Maybe even sensual.
Right. And the texts acknowledge that. It's easy to misunderstand.
So how should we understand it?
Well, Sri Ramakrishna himself talked about this. He explained that, yes, the language uses human terms of intense love and even sensation, but it's pointing towards a state of bliss that's actually beyond our normal senses.
Okay.
Think of it like trying to describe, totally new color. You have to use the words you have, the closest comparisons, even if they don't quite capture it perfectly. The gopis' experiences were profoundly spiritual, just expressed through the language of human feeling.
Got it. So what's the philosophy behind this? How does this intense, almost earthly sounding love become a path to the divine?
Right, the bigger picture. Well, the sources connect it to a pretty deep philosophical framework. Sri Krishna in this context is seen as the embodiment of Paramat Man.
Paramat Man being?
The formless absolute reality. Pure existence, knowledge, bliss, and also Purusha, the universal male principle. So Krishna is the ultimate he, you could say.
Okay, the ultimate he, so there must be a she.
Exactly. Everything else, everything with form, the entire dynamic universe, that's Prakriti. Infinite nature, the feminine principle. And Prakriti is personified as Sri Radha, Krishna's consort.
Radha. And the gopis fit in how?
The gopis, with their different ways of loving Krishna, their unique approaches, those are the bhavas. Different modes, different flavors of devotion, all directed towards the Purusha, towards Krishna.
And Radha's is the most significant, the highest bhava.
Yes, she's considered the Mahabhava, the great bhava. She represents the synthesis, the culmination of all the other ways of loving. So close to Krishna, she's essentially one with him. The goal, really.
So worshiping through these bhavas ultimately leads to Radha's state.
That's the idea. By loving Krishna wholeheartedly in whatever way resonates, you can eventually attain that Mahava state, embody that selfless love like Radha, and through that, reach liberation, that absolute bliss.
Her relationship really sets the standard then.
Absolutely. Finding joy only in Krishna's joy, with zero thought for oneself, that's the peak. The devotee in this Madhura Bhava serves the beloved in all capacities, like a servant, a friend, even with the protective care of a mother, always putting his comfort first.
It still feels quite distinct, this approach. How does it connect to, say, broader Vedantic ideas? And maybe just briefly, what are Vedantic principles in this context?
Good question. Vedanta generally explores reality, the self, often aiming for non-duality, recognizing the underlying unity of everything. So how does Madhura Bhava fit? Well, our sources use this analogy, using one thorn to remove another. Our usual strong identification is with our physical body, right? And our gender. The Madhura Bhava involves such a total, intense identification as a woman deeply in love with the divine that this focus can actually help dislodge that primary identification with one's birth gender.
I see.
The goal isn't just to swap one identity for another, but to use this intense feminine identification as a tool to eventually transcend both male and female identities, to realize the ultimate truth, the Advaitic or non-dual reality beyond all such distinctions.
That's a key point.
Yes, and it's really important, as the sources stress, to distinguish this from, say, modern Western ideas about gender identity. The aim here is transcendence of all limiting identities, not simply affirming a different one within the usual framework.
Understood. So for Sri Ramakrishna, this wasn't just theory. How did he actually live this?
Oh, completely. When he took up the Madhura Bhava, he dove in with that incredible intensity he had. He actually got women's clothes from Mathur Babru, his patron, and for 6 months straight,
6 months,
6 solid months, he lived entirely as a gopi of Vrindavan, totally consumed by this love for Krishna. His every word, every action just radiated this deep longing, the pain of being separated from his beloved, the yearning for union. People who saw him then said his actions gave them a real insight into that the gopis must have felt.
That's unbelievable commitment. Was this the only feminine approach he explored?
Well, during this period, he sometimes also saw himself as a handmaiden of the Divine Mother. But the main overwhelming focus for those 6 months was definitely serving Radha and Krishna in this Madhura Bhava, this conjugal way.
And there's some amazing stories from that time, right? Like the one during the Durga Puja.
Oh, yes. That one really shows how complete his identification was. He was in one of his deep spiritual states, completely absorbed, looking utterly feminine in the silk clothes Mathur's family had given him. Mathur's wife even put her own expensive jewelry on him.
And Mathur didn't recognize him.
Not at first. He saw Sri Ramakrishna among the women fanning the deity during the evening service and just assumed it was some visiting lady. It was only afterwards he realized who it was. Just incredible.
And it wasn't just Mathur. Even Friday, his nephew, who was always with him, sometimes couldn't pick him out in the women's quarters.
Exactly. And there's that other detail, how he'd naturally lead with his left leg when picking flowers, which is seen as a feminine gait. The Bhairavi Brahmani, his teacher, actually mistook him for Radha herself because of it.
These aren't small things. They really show a total immersion.
They really do. And alongside this identification, there's the sheer emotional intensity of his devotion to Krishna and Radha. The sources talk about unbearable pain when he felt separated from them.
Like real physical and emotional pain.
Yes. Days spent just weeping, forgetting to eat or drink. And those physical symptoms came back too. The burning sensation all over his body, sometimes blood oozing from his pores, his joints feeling loose. It was an extreme state of spiritual longing.
Wow. It's hard to even imagine that level of feeling.
And in this tradition, remember, Radha's grace is considered essential. Her love for Krishna is seen as so pure, so perfect, that you need her blessing, in a sense, to even get a vision of Krishna.
So naturally, Sri Ramakrishna focused his devotion on Radha too.
Precisely. He prayed intensely to her. And fairly quickly, she revealed herself to him in a vision, a luminous form, which then merged into his own body.
That merging seems to be a recurring theme in his experiences.
It is, a sign of profound union. And he described Radha afterwards, her incredible beauty, her sweetness, that absolute selflessness focused only on Krishna. He even mentioned her specific complexion, light yellow.
So after seeing Radha, what happened?
Well, he started to feel that he was Radha. Through constant meditation on her, his own sense of self just dissolved into her being. He became essentially an embodiment of Mahabhava.
Mahabhava, that supreme passion again.
Yes, that total consuming love that Radha represents. And people around him, even learned devotees like Vaishnava Charan and the Brahmani herself, they were amazed. They recognized his state as identical to what the scriptures described about Radha and about Sri Chaitanya's experiences too.
Didn't he say something about experiencing many different emotions for God?
He did. He mentioned experiencing 19 different kinds of divine emotion simultaneously, which, in the Bhakti traditions, is seen as incredibly rare, a sign of the highest realization, synonymous with Mahabhava.
So all this intensity, this identification with Radha, it led somewhere.
It led to the ultimate goal of this particular path. Sri Krishna himself appeared to him in his graceful, beloved form, fulfilling that deep, agonizing longing.
Did they merge too?
Yes. Just as Radha had, Krishna's form merged into Sri Ramakrishna's, a complete union.
What was that like for him afterwards?
The sources say he spent the next 2 or 3 months just swimming in divine bliss. Sometimes he'd even forget his own body, feeling he was Krishna, seeing Krishna in everyone and everything around him.
That constant perception of the divine everywhere.
Everywhere. Living, non-living, it didn't matter. Years later, he'd point to a particular blue flower to show someone the exact shade of Krishna's complexion as he saw it then.
So the agony finally ended, replaced by bliss.
Completely. The terrible pain of separation vanished, replaced by this direct realization, this constant connection to the beloved, tapping into that eternal bliss. It was the culmination of that whole intense sadhana.
Just incredible.
And there's one more vision from around that time that really sums things up. He was listening to a reading of the Bhagavata Purana.
The scripture about Krishna.
Right. He went into an ecstatic state and saw these luminous rays coming from Krishna's feet, and they connected Krishna, the Bhagavata scripture itself, and him, Sri Ramakrishna, all together.
Like a triangle of light.
Exactly. And it brought this profound realization. God, the devotee, and the Holy Scriptures, they are all one, all part of the same single, indivisible reality.
What a powerful way to experience that oneness. What an incredible journey we've just traced.
Truly profound.
So wrapping up this deep dive, we've really looked closely at Sri Ramakrishna's experience with the Madhura Bhava, this really intense and unique form of spiritual practice.
And a few key things really stand out, don't they? First, just how central divine love is this incredibly powerful force driving everything.
Yeah, and the idea of actually going beyond our usual sense of self, our identity, in that passionate search for connection.
Right, and maybe the biggest takeaway is just the sheer transformative power that comes from that kind of single-minded, focused devotion.
It really does make you wonder, doesn't it? Here's something to maybe chew on. If human emotion, when it's channeled with that kind of intensity towards something profound, can lead to such extraordinary transformation spiritually, what kind of unexpected insights, what kind of changes might be possible if we brought that level of focus to any area of life? What's the beloved idea or goal or passion in your own life that might deserve that kind of dedication? You know, what surprising things might happen if you gave it that?
I hope you like this chapter. We need volunteers and sponsors to create content with even better quality and with more variety. If you wish to join this initiative as a volunteer or sponsor, please click the links given in description below. To help us reach more viewers, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Biography Central. Thank you for your time. It means a lot. Namaste.